Alright, hello and welcome to the Devstream 101 breakdown. So, at the top of my notes here, you can see Damage 3.0. They talked a little bit about it and what that's going to entail for the game. The last couple times, and by couple times I mean like 10 times, I've tried to start this video, I have talked about that for like 8 to 10 minutes, which is too long for a YouTube video and probably not suited for a breakdown of sorts. So, instead of talking about that first, we're going to talk about that last. For those of you that want to hear me talk about that, that will be at the end of the video, but let's just go over the things that are very quick and easy to talk about first, and the things that probably most people actually give a shit about. So, the fan weapon, the fan melee weapon, is coming before the end of the year. That's dope. That melee weapon looks sick. It's probably going to be super fancy, and I hope it will also be very useful. No, it's just there's only excitement for a new melee weapon. I got no problems with this. That'll be really good. And along with that, we got some word on focus changes and why we haven't gotten the universal pool and the full refund yet. The reason for that is because they are going to be reviewing more focus nodes, which is fantastic news for me because I haven't done my focus review yet, because I was waiting for like further changes to progression and a bunch of other things like that to then also review all the nodes and things, which, let's put it bluntly, a lot of the nodes are really, really rough right now, and seeing that they are also going to be hopefully very much improving a lot of those nodes is very, very good news. They also talked about reducing a lot of the costs on those nodes so that people can get to them faster. All good news, just everything. All of it was good news for Focus, and I think it means really good things for that system just coming along in the future. So I will happily wait for those changes if it means that Focus is a very good long-running system, like how we have the Endo system working right now. Along with that, we got some news on some things coming for PoE, which is the Mega List. So the Mega List is basically a super boss version of the Terror List. It is not the second Eidolon, which we are still getting, but it is a bigger, tougher edition of the Terror List. I think it will probably be very, very fun. It's going to have new attacks and things, and I would hope, better rewards, though they did not mention those. Along with that, we're also getting dynamic weather for the planes, which will very much increase the variety of... It just increases the variety of the environment, which is very, very helpful because obviously we're going to be doing this for months and or years. We're going to be on the planes for months and or years. So it will make it more varied, which is a fantastic thing. And also getting the weather tech into the game is, I'm very certain, quite challenging. So it will be a big, a step up in the available tech to the devs, which is always a plus. We also got some Mirage improvements. Basically, they're changing how her 2 works, and it is going to be 2 different things. In the light, it is going to be a blind, and in the darkness, it is going to be an explosion, which basically means that her 2 is going to be a lot more useful, because a blind is very good, even though her 4 already does that, and an explosion, given enough damage, will also be quite good. This also synergizes with her 1, in that her clones will also put presence down. That would be a blind or an explosion. So it'll basically just multiply the damage like you would expect, basically. Then we got some word on the ghouls. 3 of the ghoul units are going to be here for the planes very soon, and one of them is going to be coming later, and he is, he's a weird guy. He's got some stuff going on. So you guys can just enjoy how he looks while we talk about the 10-0 pump action shotgun. That is almost out, hopefully, and that will be done by the end of the year. It looks very good. Its visual design is something I'm very into, so I hope that it is awesome. When I expect it will probably be awesome. The Plasmor is very, very well done, and if this follows that trend, and like many of the other new weapons coming out, it'll just be great, plain and simple. So I'm very into that. And lastly, they talked about bird companions and pets 2.0. And for this, I think it's best to just watch the clip and then talk about it, so that clip will be right here.
They said, hey, Rebecca, ask about bird companions.
Oh, that's a tough one to figure out. We all kind of want to do it.
Yeah.
But
I think the universal vacuum debate has reopened the need to kind of revisit Sentinels, and I think we need to I was talking to Steve after the last live stream that I think we need a wholesale review of all the Sentinels and companions and everything, and kind of trying to bring them all to the same level of usefulness and selection, or make sure they each have a niche that they fill correctly. Really well.
Yeah.
So before we go adding birds on top of that, I think we need to reset the base and kind of do Pets 2.0.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back. So, I know that there are a couple ways that what that means can be envisioned. There is the way where they want to like change and buff everything to make it all along the same lines and give us universal vacuum, which is interesting to me, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then there is the line where there's the view that they want to like give different niches, I guess, to the different companions that are more prominent, and then still keep vacuum sentinels only. So for me, I'm going to prefer to think about this from the first aspect, which is very interesting to me, because from my personal point of view, I still feel like even given a universal vacuum, where vacuum is a passive on Warframes at the current range that it is now, that I would definitely still use sentinels, and like very much so, along with the dogs and the cats. But from what I imagine is the view of the devs, they don't think that sentinels would be useful enough. So if they were going to do universal vacuum, they would want to do a rebalance across the lines of all companions, in that they would want to make sentinels useful enough, and they would want to make Kubros useful enough, and they would want to make Kavats useful enough, where they don't think that the sentinels need vacuum like holding them up, basically, which I think is good. That would be I'm not gonna say no to that. I'm very into that, actually, because if the plan is, hey, let's rebalance companions so that we can give everyone univac, because it appears that like pretty much everybody wants that, and then also make all the companions equally as useful and like have their own niches, that's awesome. It's very hard to find a complaint with that logic, honestly, because that would just mean good things for all players and like wildly more companion diversity, and like that seems great. And it would also mean that we would get univac, which is just that everyone wins. Though I will say, and I know that this is technically a very small majority of players, a very small minority of players rather, or at least it very much appears to be the people that don't want like univac. There are some of them. They exist. I know that might be really surprising that those people do exist, but if they are going to add univac, I would, for those people, because they're important too, making it so that there's like in the gameplay options just a toggle to turn it off. I think that would be great for those people that don't want it. And like I know that they seem like an incredibly small subset of people, but they are also players of the game, and they also deserve to have fun, as it turns out. So for them, just also adding a toggle, if that is what the devs intend and want to plan, which I think would be fantastic, that would be great. But yeah, it's a really interesting, like, what I envision as that intention is really interesting, and it's a really different perspective that would also still make everyone happy, that I hadn't considered, just because it is so much work on DE's part to go in and do something like what they said, which is Pets 2.0. But yeah, that's really neat. If that is the plan for the future, I can do nothing but be excited for that, basically. Anyway, let's talk about Damage 3.0, because I have very strong feelings, and I can say a lot about this because I've been playing this game a long time. I've been through Damage 1.0. I've been playing Damage 2.0 for a good long time. So they talked about changes with the basic damage types, because in development of Korra, who can change between IPS, which is impact, puncture, slash, the main damage types, that slash is significantly stronger and scales when compared to impact and puncture. So why would anyone ever use impact and puncture? That's a very important observation, and the method that the devs seem to have chosen to go down is the definitely preferred one, I think, which is, well, let's make impact and puncture as strong as slash is, as opposed to like nerfing slash down or something. Though, and the way they said this makes me think that this is not intended. I think mixed in there is a slash nerf, just because of the way that, like, in practice it would be a slash nerf, but on paper I can see how someone could write down that change and go, oh yeah, that seems right. That seems like how slash should be. that doesn't seem that would actually make slash stronger, right? Like that would be the reaction of someone like maybe like pen and papering it and like not who's like playing it. It's not like not playing it. How do I want to put this? From like a development standpoint, it doesn't seem like a nerf probably, but in the functionality of the way slash is being currently used, especially along the lines of one of the very, very new mods in this event, it would be a nerf. So let's just get started talking about this. Basically, they want to change puncture from being a set percentage to being able to stack up to 90%. For those of you that do not know, puncture currently makes it so that the enemy's damage is reduced by a set percentage. This would make it scale up to 90%, which at first glance might seem quite good, but the problem with that is that whenever there are lots of little enemies generally on the field, and those enemies, you want to kill them, which reduces their damage by 100%. Enemies that this would be useful on, like say for example sentients, which usually survive quite a bit longer, are immune to procs. So boss type enemies and sentients and things like that would not be affected by this, and those are the enemies that you would definitely want to be affected by this, in that those are the situations where this type of thing would actually be useful. Along with that, a change that I would like to see, and following in line with what I'm imagining because of the way the initial damage weighting works in Damage 2.0, see puncture also be this, and also like an offensive buff that is not quite as strong as slash. In that, if you get up to a certain amount of puncture procs, like stacked at once, it would temporarily also reduce enemy armor by, say, like 50% along with that. Because then you have something that is a half defensive, half offensive, like more middle-of-the-road direct competitor with slash in a different way, which I think would be very, very interesting and also suit the nature of puncture to be anti-armor. So I think that puncture, like that is a good on-the-way change, but wouldn't quite make it enough to be something that players would actually shoot for in like the general like day-to-day play, where as current, slash is the number one gun, as it were. With that, impact changes, however, seem very, very good, but pose an immediate contrast to what puncture would end up being. And that being that the impact stagger would scale up into a full-on ragdoll, which would be incredibly good. Like having like fast-firing weapons that have impact, like say the Axolotls Prime, would then be very, very good for disabling an enemy. The thing about that is, even if you take that and directly compare it to how puncture would be, that is a 100% reduction in damage. You stagger them and then you knock them down. While they're on the floor, they're not going to be hurting you. That's a 100% reduction in damage, and obviously you would want to continue to be proccing them to keep knocking them down. So by default, that would be significantly better than stacking those puncture procs. So with that, I think that is also weighing into why it would be important for puncture to have something else to go along with it, maybe like a double-sided effect or a bonus for getting to that 90% reduced damage, where then you now do more damage, like I just went over. Otherwise, when comparing impact to like that version of impact to current slash, there is definitely merit to having a very high amount of crowd control on your main weapon. That is definitely valuable for sure. When compared to slash's very offensive nature, this is an incredibly defensive nature of impact, and then combining impact and slash together would be very, very good. Also, given the nature of knockdowns and how those affect stealth damage and etc., 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 on melee weapons, it would make impact and slash play together very, very nicely. And then we got to talk about the potential slash nerf and why that would be a slash nerf and all those things to go with that. So at current, when you get a slash proc, it is 35% of your total base damage dealt as finisher damage over 7 seconds, or rather, as ticks 7 seconds long, or each second. You know what I mean. The way slash works, basically. Instead of that, which is very, very good and is what is making Hunter Munitions, the new mod from the event, incredibly effective on a wide variety of weapons, and making that weird mod actually very useful in a wide amount of situations, it would make that mod basically completely useless on weapons that are not already pretty much all slash. So, with this change, this would not nerf and would instead actually buff, say, the Atarax, because you would take that 35% base damage and instead that would be like a stacking percentage of actual slash damage, because they would be like 35%, and then that would increase as you get more slash procs, and then those also stack. So on something like the Atarax, that would be de facto like better for sure. But on other weapons that are utilizing weird ways to get slash procs, or the few slash procs that those weapons get, like say the axe stilettos, they would be basically completely useless, which I think goes against probably the nature of wanting to make puncture, impact, and slash like all things that you want to get always, basically. So with that, I think it's kind of on paper, you would be like, yeah, you want it to be based on the slash damage, not the full damage of the weapon, but it limits the design space in, I think, a way that would be bad for the game, because as we just saw with Hunter Munitions, which is a mod that just released, and it's a very, very interesting mod that opens up a lot of weird possibilities for other weapons that wouldn't normally really have, or normally at all have access to slash procs, to then suddenly get them and be like really interestingly good with that. It makes it so that instead can't really happen, and those things can't like have a weird mod that connects the dots and do cool shit, basically. So that stuff would be, I think it's just like a weird thing that it's hard to quantify, because the current way slash works, I think, is great, because it's very, very useful and like all that stuff. But I think this would be a rather significant nerf to slash, in that the design space around it would be less open, and it would actively make a mod they just released basically worthless outside an incredibly limited subset of weapons, and even then it probably wouldn't be used because those weapons are already doing slash procs, if that makes sense. This is why this is at the end. So with that, they also talked about the over 100% status, that being like how we currently have crits, which is you have regular crits, you have orange crits, you have red crits, giving status a similar system where you can get like above and beyond a regular status, and then rolling those into like more powerful statuses would be a very good way to basically make status have a comeback against critical damage. And then they also talked about a little bit, not any specifics, elementals also getting a look at having that scaling stuff like we just talked about with impact and puncture, and how slash, like things would be more like slash damage, basically. I think overall, that is definitely a very good direction to go with Damage 3.0, having like all of the damage types be a lot more even and stuff. But on the whole, and I know it's rough and it's early, and like it's like somehow I know there's a lot of people that are like, it's not worth this much to cut discussion, but it is like really important to me that it's as good as it can be, and like things are as close as they can be. And yeah, I don't know, I care about it a lot. I care about Warframe a lot, and I care about the math behind all the things, and things like actually being close together, and like the design space of the game, and like interesting mods being added to the game, like Hunter Munitions, like remaining interesting and good, and like the design space for that stuff still opening up, because it's cool and the game is good. So yeah, that is a lot of fucking words about Damage 3.0. If you're still here at the fucking actual end of this video, you can stand my bullshit. So thanks for sticking around. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.